Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to webinar 5 of the Australia-ASEAN Academics Forum, Online Education During COVID-19 and Beyond. And before we start, can I ask you to check that you are on mute or not? If you haven't muted yourself, can you please do so before we start? Thank you very much. Okay, so now I'm going to do the acknowledgement of the country. This is a very important part in formal webinars in Australia. So I will do the acknowledgement of the country before I introduce our wonderful speakers today. The Australia-ASEAN Academics Forum, Online Education During COVID-19 and Beyond, acknowledges the traditional owners of the land where this program was developed, the Palawa people of the Latruta Nations. We pay respect to the traditional owners and to elders past, present, and emerging of the land on which all the University of Tasmania campuses stand. On behalf of the University of Tasmania, we acknowledge all countries participating in this forum and also acknowledge their elders and ancestors and their legacies to us. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands where our partners and participants live and work across Australia and Southeast Asia. Now, it's my honor to introduce our speaker today, the first webinar of the week and the fifth webinar of the June webinar series. And first of all, thank you very much, Dr. Kim McLeod, for accepting our invitation to be a speaker in our important webinar series about online education. So Dr. Kim McLeod is a senior lecturer in the School of Social Sciences at the University of Tasmania. Kim uses philosophically informed and asked-based approaches to explore the social dimensions of health and well-being. Kim has one single author book published in 2017. Its title is Well-Being Emerging, How Health Emerges from Assemblages of Everyday Life. This book presents her approach to understanding health as ongoing processes of change. Kim's research program aims to articulate the social change required to achieve health equity in Australia. Dr. Kim McLeod is particularly interested in how we might harness cultural diversity as a strength in healthcare and education context. She has been absolutely excellent in her teaching. She leads the social diversity and health teaching program for the School of Social Sciences. She delivers modularized content related to culture, diversity, health, and culturally safe healthcare into a range of health profession courses at the University of Tasmania. Dr. Kim McLeod is also a co-editor of the first Australian textbook about culturally safe healthcare for health profession students, and she has been awarded 3 University of Tasmania Teaching Merit Certificates in recognition of her excellent teaching practices. It's my absolutely pleasure to introduce Dr. Kim McLeod. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. And I'm sure all of us are really looking forward to her presentation. Over to you, Dr. McLeod. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Finn, for that kind introduction. I'm just trying to share my presentation. Let me see. No. No. Apologies.
Not
sure why this is not. I'm sorry, I'm not sure why this isn't working.
Can you send it to me and I can share it on your behalf? Or you just click on share screen and you choose one screen to share. Okay, it worked.
Oh, that did work.
Yeah, we can see it. We can see it. Yep. Can you choose? Yep. We can see it now. And you can click on, yeah, okay, great.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you everyone for your patience. And thank you so much to the forum for this opportunity to present. I'm really excited to present to such a dynamic group of researchers across Australia and Asia. So in my presentation today, I'm going to be talking about the importance of attending to relationships, cultural safety education in online spaces. And I'll just introduce myself a little bit more, just building on Kim's introduction. So the area of my broad research is the health social sciences. I'm particularly interested in the context of wellbeing and recovery. And my research really focuses on the moment, the question, how does being responsive to cultural and social diversity contribute to positive health and education outcomes? And I'm particularly interested in developing the social sciences theories and methods, which include a diversity of experiences and voices. So my teaching program is also part of this, and I'm really interested in researching how to best teach students to appreciate the links between culture, diversity and health. And as part of this, I lead the Cultural Safety and Healthcare Teaching Program at the University of Tasmania. Just to give you a quick sense of what I'm going to work through in the course of my presentation. So I'm going to make the case for the importance of tending to relationships in online cultural safety education, and in particular in a way that includes the affordances of the online space. I'm going to quickly outline the teaching and learning context to this presentation, which is the Cultural Safety and Healthcare Teaching Program. And then I'll identify what we know to be some really distinctive features of cultural safety education. I'll then move into describing the changing context which we encountered last year here in Australia and other places, which was a rapid move to the online teaching environment. So in my teaching context, this meant shifting shared physical space workshops to online workshops. And out of this was generated the research question, how does the online classroom mediate dimensions of cultural safety education for students and for teachers? I'll then move into talking about a research project that we undertook to really explore this, to compare cultural safety education in shared physical space classrooms and online classrooms. And out of this, I'll discuss some of the ways that this helps us to think about best practice in online cultural safety education. So first, the Cultural Safety and Healthcare Teaching Program at UTAS. So nationally, all accrediting bodies for allied health, nursing, midwifery and medical professions in Australia require tertiary students to be culturally safe with regards to cultural and social diversity. So when I talk about culturally safe and sensitive practice, this means having an awareness of the cultural needs and contexts of all patients and clients to obtain good health outcomes. And in this setting, cultural difference is really broadly defined. It includes a range of variables, including age and generation, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, religion, spiritual beliefs, gender and sexuality, and so on. So the key aims of the teaching program are to develop students' critical thinking about how the broader context of a person's life experience shapes their health experiences and their health outcomes. And the other main aim is to really get the students to develop their self-reflection and their capacities for cultural self-awareness, and really start to try and make some links about how both those things may potentially impact their care of others. Just to give you a little bit of a sense of the program underpinnings or the pedagogical underpinnings to the teaching program, there are several frameworks that I draw on to deliver this teaching program. So the first is there's a real focus on translating the philosophy and the principles of cultural safety into practice. Now, this is quite an emerging field. The textbook that you see on the screen was published a couple of weeks ago by colleagues, myself, and it's the first textbook in the Australian context which is really around getting students to develop their capacities in relation to culturally safe healthcare. One of the other main pedagogies is transformative pedagogy. So the teaching is really focused on facilitating students' capacities to be transformative in their future healthcare practice. So all the students are going to move on to be health professionals of some sort. So the teaching really aims to create teaching and learning environments which cultivate a desire in students to be change agents and committed to their own ongoing learning about navigating culturally safe healthcare. The teaching program is also informed by the frameworks and politics of decolonisation. So in this way, I draw on these ideas to really interrogate the whiteness, how my whiteness shapes my thinking, the curriculum development and teaching practice. And so this sort of flags the commitment in the teaching program to continually interrogating the politics and the power that interplays with the intention to facilitate a transformative learning experience. And the final pedagogy that underpins the program are relational pedagogies. So these are pedagogies where learning and knowledge is seen as a result of the relationships and the interaction between teachers and students, and the interaction or the in-between, the space is seen as a space where education takes place. So these pedagogies are appropriate for the teaching program because they really hone in on a focus on relationships. This is working in relationship is crucial to the students' later capacities to work in culturally safe ways with their colleagues and also with their clients and patients. So the teaching program pre-COVID was delivered in a mixed mode delivery. So we have multiple campuses. We have campuses Hobart, Launceston, Burnie, and also on the mainland in Sydney. I have really large teaching cohorts and I have a large teaching team of around 14 casual academics who help me to deliver the program. So when COVID happened, So pre-COVID, it was a mixed delivery. So we had online content. So there were teaching and learning activities that were delivered online, as well as online content for the students to engage with. And in conjunction with that, we also had shared physical space workshops. So in these workshops, students undertook peer-led and tutor-facilitated teaching and learning activities. So it was mixed delivery and it worked very effectively. The students engaged online. And they also followed up with teaching and learning activities that they undertook together in the shared physical space classroom. When COVID happened, we moved to entirely online delivery. So the online content stayed the same, but we had to rapidly shift the shared physical space workshops to synchronous online workshops. So in the workshop space, the aim is to really for the students to experience teaching and learning activities that help them to fulfil the aims of the teaching program, which is to really develop their thinking, their critical thinking about how the broader context shapes health experiences and outcomes, and also to take part in teaching and learning activities that help them to develop their own self-reflection and their own cultural self-awareness. So because this all happened really quickly, there wasn't a great deal of scope for transforming the teaching and learning activities. Basically, the teaching and learning activities that were designed for the on-campus workshops or the shared physical space workshops were just translated pretty directly to the online space. So these were teaching and learning activities like students would respond to a case study, they would engage in small group discussions, or they would participate in a brainstorm together. So this happening was of great interest to myself and to the teaching teams. Over the past several years, we've been working together in a community of practice. And in our community of practice, we've been engaging in ongoing collaborative reflective practice through speaking with each other in collaborative conversations, and also by doing individual reflective writing. And this, our community of practice evolved into 3 research projects where we examined best practice in relation to teaching in this space. So we knew from the literature, but also from our experiences in working together, reflecting together, and doing research together, that effective cultural safety education requires positive, respectful relatedness between students and teachers and students and students. In other words, that we all need to be in the teaching and learning environment together as co-learners, effectively learning together. We knew from our teaching experiences that trusting, respectful relationships in the space are absolutely critical to ensuring that student resistance and discomfort, which is a characteristic of teaching in this space, become positive learning experiences. And also that positive, respectful relationships are so important to teachers and students finding ways to manage the affective and the emotional aspects of learning in this space, which is again a key characteristic of cultural safety education. So we know that it's really important to attend to and care for these distinctive dimensions of cultural safety education, both for students and for teachers. And there is very little literature about this, about how to do this in relation to the shared physical space workshops, but there's even less when we come to looking to what it means to create caring teaching environments in the online space. So this led us to undertake a research project together, and it came out of the research question which grew from the teaching team, which was, how does the online classroom mediate dimensions of cultural safety education for students or teachers? And so we developed this research question really with a view to make a contribution to best practice in teaching in this space. It was an exploratory qualitative research project which was led by my colleague from the social sciences, Dr. Robin Moore, with Dr. Natalie Majstorovic, Rachel Jones, and myself. So it was a small exploratory project. There were 5 tutors, members of the existing teaching team, who were involved in facilitating the online workshops. And all the 5 tutors had previously facilitated workshops in the shared physical space classroom. So these 5 tutors, who were the research participants in the project, were invited to reflect on the challenges and the rewards that they were encountering in the online workshops, and to really think about that by way of comparison to their teaching experiences, delivering very similar workshops in the shared physical space workshops. So the participants in the study shared their written reflections about online teaching with each other, and they also participated in a collaborative reflective conversation. So the purpose of this engagement was just not purely data collection. We're also really interested in using the conversation and the sharing as means of continuing the community of practice that's really run alongside the teaching program for several years. So the process of analysis was to, the research team thematically co-analysed the reflective writing and the collaborative conversations. Okay, so I'll just turn to the key findings from the study now. And I guess all the findings that I'm going to go on to describe now really centre on showing what the online environment mediates in comparison to doing the workshops in the shared physical space. So firstly, the online environment affects how students turn up. It's really fundamental to how students engage in the teaching and learning environment. At the University of Tasmania, we used Blackboard Collaborate as the web conferencing tool. So this effectively created the online environment for students and teachers. So we encountered in this space in Tasmania, and also connecting with Sydney students, that there were bandwidth issues for teachers and students. There were common freezing, students and teachers dropped out, and this was quite disruptive and stressful. And it took time away from the time that the teachers would usually use to facilitate the learning process. We also found that the student learning environment was fundamentally different. The students, it was clear that they were often in a home environment that was busy, that was noisy, and as such, they avoided turning the camera on. So overall, this experience of teaching online highlighted the impact of economic inequality on accessing learning in the virtual classrooms, because what we also found was that many students were using their phones to access their online learning workshop. There were also some forms of contact and communication between students and the tutor that no longer happened now that we were in the online space. There was the absence of informal conversation between students, which is possible when students move in and out of the classroom, and the incidental learning that happens when students discuss unit content as part of their social connections with other students was also missing. Another key way that the online environment mediated student engagement was it shaped how students communicated. So this was very specific to what happened in our workshops, which was that the students overwhelmingly relied on the written chat function in the web conferencing space. So this, we can see, like, it enabled some things and it really limited other forms of student communication. So in and of itself, the chat function was an opportunity for peer learning. It did, and it was effective for students to ask relevant questions of each other and of the teacher. And it was possible that it did suit some students' preferred communication style. But we also noted how it limited what students did online. So student responses in the online chat were often short and perfunctory. It was difficult for the tutors to elicit an expanded response. So a student would make a small statement, and it was very difficult to grow that and to generate some conversation around it. And so students sort of use the chat function in a limited way. They'd often just express agreement or indicate a degree of understanding, and there was very little further reflection or critical thinking that was undertaken just using the chat function. So the impact of the chat function and the reliance really on using that as the means of communicating in the online space did really mediate the kind of relationship making that could happen between the students and the teacher. And it limited the capacity for growing a sense of class relatedness, or the sense that the class is developing in its ability to learn and share and discuss quite complex and challenging issues together. Another way that the online environment mediated relationship is by shaping how it is that students and teachers their bodily presence was part of the online space. Now, this is particularly significant in relation to the cultural safety classroom, because we know that cultural safety education is highly embodied as difference by students and teachers alike. So in our workshops, our online workshops, we found that students avoided using their video cameras, and this meant there was just a complete loss of body language and the visual element for the tutors who were facilitating the workshops. Now, this is connected to the limitations of Blackboard Collaborate, which only allow for 5 camera feeds at any one time. So the platform does not have the capacity to replicate what happens in the face-to-face teaching experience, where a teacher can view the entire classroom. So what happens is that when one student does speak and use their video, make their video visible, they become a large tile with some smaller tiles in the background. So this left the tutors in a without any visual or auditory means to assess whether the students were engaging or understood the material being presented in the workshop. And in the process of this teaching, the online teachers realised the value of embodied responses, as it was not there. Okay, so they really noticed that without their capacity to respond in an embodied way and to see the students' bodies, they were very limited in their facilitation capacities. And they realised how much they had really relied on this to read the room and to direct students' engagement. So the workshop activities are often designed around finding ways to get students to think about their values, their beliefs, their experiences, and the need to reflect on prejudices with a view to preventing unsafe healthcare experiences for patients when they're in the workplace. And so for this co-learning to take place, students need to engage with material based on their ideas and their experiences. And we found that it wasn't possible to develop the relationships and the relatedness so that students can feel that it's a safe space to share their values, their experiences and their ideas. And one tutor indicated, the impact of this on their teaching experience, saying that for me, being in the main classroom, the main web Blackboard Collaborate classroom was like talking to the empty room that I was sitting in. We also found that the online environment does shape the kind of possibilities for critical discussions. So tutors did report that they found that the students did give a familiar range of responses in the online classroom, similar to those that they would encounter in the shared physical space classroom. So this meant that the students, sometimes do show the generalised and stereotyped ideas and knowledge, but then on other occasions they do offer insightful and empathetic and thoughtful observations. But given this, there was a key limit to how it is that students responded. So tutors discussed how the online classroom prevented the conditions that they know are required to facilitate critical discussion and the necessary ontological disturbance in students. As one student describes, I want to have tough, difficult conversations with the students, so they're going to ontologically disturb them, but you need to bring people close to do that, and you can't do this in this environment, and it means the online environment. One of the conditions that facilitates critical discussion and the necessary ontological disturbance is teachers observing, feeling and sensing that the students are invested in and care about their learning. And again, the tutors really grappled with the lack of data that they usually draw on to ascertain investment in care, which is through students' bodies, their bodily demeanour and also their facial discussions. So this there was an overall absence of the conditions necessary for open discussion and exploration of different topics, which limited the kind of critical discussion that research participants wanted to facilitate in their workshops. So an example of this would be students being able to identify their beliefs, but then not stepping into critically evaluating those beliefs. So another aspect of cultural safety teaching that the online environment mediates relates to teachers' emotional labour. Cultural safety education aims to develop students' awareness and appreciation of difference and an understanding of the importance of this capacity to their future healthcare practice. So this necessarily involves legitimising differences as well as an exploration of the self and one's own beliefs, attitudes and values. This means that teaching in this space is characterised by the emotional labour that is involved in facilitating and participating in what can only be described as hard conversations. So this is just part of the terrain of cultural safety teaching, that there are there are challenges that are integral to the context, such as student discomfort with their learning and resistance. And the milieu overall produces effective and embodied experiences for teachers. So we found that the online environment intensified teachers' emotional labour. Because students were unable or unwilling to engage with the video and audio, this was a really added to the emotional labour that the tutors engaged in. In combination with teachers' attempts to engage students, the lack of reciprocity from students left teachers feeling exhausted and tired, drained or pooped. One tutor said, by the end of the workshops, I just felt completely drained and exhausted after having been switched on and engaging with while my students were just there. It's really hard to be talking to students and not getting anything back from them. The experience felt like being on radio or doing a podcast and not knowing how the audience is experiencing the learning online. So this contributed to the experience by teachers that the teaching online was a one-way exchange, and that their role had shifted more into being a deliverer of content. So to mitigate some of this, the tutors modified their teaching practice. Some of them became more performative and as an attempt to encourage interaction and participation in the online workshops. But again, this did add to the emotional labour of the teaching. And the overall lack of student engagement left the participants in this study as struggling to feel like they were effective tutors. They described feeling disheartened, inadequate and dejected by these teaching experiences. As one research participant said, I feel like at the end of a workshop, like an absolute failure, like just what am I doing? So there's quite significant impacts on teaching practice. So just to recap what it is that the research project shows, that the online environment does mediate a great deal. It mediates how students turn up to the teaching environment, it mediates the kind of contact and communication that happens, it mediates the kind of aspects of experience, identity and self that are shared. And all of this impacts the relationship, the potential for relationship building and community building. So we can really see that one of the sort of key outcomes from this study is that it shows that the technological affordances of the online space are co-creating the teaching and learning environment. So if we know that creating trusting relationships is crucial in cultural safety education, I would argue that it's really, really important to tend to relationships, but in a way that includes and factors in and works in a productive way with the affordances of the online environment. So I'll just discuss some of the possible approaches that can potentially be taken to do this, and which I hope to move into doing in my own practice. So one of the ways to do this is to really actively think about how to add online affordances so that they're a consistent part of the pedagogies that are used to inform teaching. And I think the process that's proposed by Montalongo and Eaton is a strong approach. They suggest to be really clear on pedagogy and then to engage the technological infrastructures of our online learning environments to explore how to cultivate environments that prioritise relational capacities. So in this setting, I think it would be very productive to expand the pedagogies that enable relational learning, the ones that I mentioned at the start of this presentation, transformative pedagogies, relational pedagogies, to really think through these pedagogies in relation to the affordances and the capacities of online technology. So this would mean really investing in thinking through the links between the pedagogy, the content, the learning process, and the technological infrastructure. It would mean extending the pedagogies that are used to create specific, consistent, critical digital pedagogical strategies. So for example, pedagogies that support relationship building. So really to think through how to enable this by harnessing what is possible online. For example, we know that engaging bodily responses is really important in this teaching context. So how can we positively engage the body through online activities? We're wanting to model the importance of active and deep listening. Well, how would this be possible? Thinking about it, learning, developing these capacities with students in online ways. And I think it's important, I know that the research project presented a lot of, I guess, less than positive aspects of what happened in the student engagement, participation and communication in the online workshop space. But I do think that it's really possible to approach the technological affordances as potentially enabling. You know, if we can work with them and what they can do and what they can't do and what they enable and what they constrain in a productive way, it will open up more ways of working in dialogue with students. It will open up more engagement and more scope for developing relationships and community with students. So this actually, there's not a great deal of work that's been done in this space. It will be really great to develop it for cultural safety education. Another way would be to really consider further how students relate to their online environments. So actively explore what different spaces, online spaces, enable for students in relation to their sense of connection, relationship or community building. So looking at what different chat rooms or video meeting spaces, or the interactive whiteboard, for example, like what are the actual capacities of these technologies in terms of forming relationships. And use this knowledge as a basis for developing a range of teaching and learning activities that take up and use these different online spaces. I also think it's possible to think about, well, how can these different online spaces be used in a cumulative way across the course of a subject or a unit to develop the feeling of relatedness and positive trust between teachers and students. And I have taken up this idea in my return to mixed delivery this year. So I've wanted to really try and develop students feeling connected to the online and digital teaching strategies in an ongoing way. So I've really tried to develop the program to emphasise the continuous nature of online and on-campus teaching and learning spaces. So not the students are coming on campus to learn, but I'm wanting them to really use digital learning strategies in the classroom to really feel that they are staying connected to their online learning skills while they're in the on-campus spaces. I think it would be really positive step to clarify more the intended learning outcomes of online teaching activities. So to develop intended learning outcomes that really assess students' own insights about their own learning, about their relational capacities for collaboration, for being sensitive to difference as they are enacted and explored in online spaces. I think it's also really important to look at how teachers intersect with all of this, and it's really important to think about how to train and support and resource teachers in the work in this space. So I think this could involve, making sure that the teachers, understand how the technological infrastructure is actively being worked with to enable relational outcomes, and training for the teachers to really understand, well, we're working with particular online spaces in particular ways because we know that they make certain forms of teaching and learning possible, even though they may limit it in other ways. I'll just finish up by pointing to some lines of inquiry that come out of the research project. So I think there is a lot of work to be done to do research into, well, how do students engage with online content and learning activities? It's a very undeveloped field, and particularly in relation to cultural safety education. There's a lot more work to be done to explore how cultural safety philosophy and other critical frameworks and pedagogies are actually taken up in online teaching strategies and the doing of online teaching. We need to do a lot more investigation into, well, what are the relationship and community building activities that work effectively in online spaces using different technological affordances. And there's also a whole host of work that can and needs to happen, which really looks at how it is that embodied practices intersect with online teaching, because this is such an important component of effective cultural safety education. So I think this is the overall case that I wanted to make through my presentation, which is, you know, the importance of tending to relationships to develop good online cultural safety education necessarily needs to include tending to how it is that the affordances of the online environment are part of creating the overall teaching and learning environment, which in turn shapes the sorts of relationships that can happen. And I think doing more work in this space is a way to further best practice in online cultural safety education. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kim McLeod, for a very fascinating presentation. I'm sure we have learned a lot from your presentation and consider student engagement and safety in the online space. So it's now time for questions and comment. Everyone, feel free. We still have a lot of time now, so feel free to turn on your video to engage with the speaker. So we have one question from Wora Wood already. Are you there? Can you turn on your video and engage with the speaker? Because one of the findings and one of the challenges she identified in the research is that students didn't turn on the video to engage and they can see the body language. So now we need to apply this technique in our forum. Everybody feel free to turn on your videos if you feel comfortable, and so we can see your body language.
Thank you, Ben. I can tell you've been a very active listener of my presentation.
Okay, it's very fascinating. Thank you. So, Wora Wood, where are you? Would you like to ask Kim directly? Just introduce yourself first. Where are you from, etc. Your research, teaching interest, and then you can ask your questions. So first of all, we can get to know you a little bit more, and then you can interact with all of us. Where are you, Wora Wood?
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, very clear.
Okay. Yes, I'm Wora Wood. I'm working in Bangkok, Kasetsart University, Bangkok in Thailand. And actually, I used to study in Sydney for a year at Macquarie University. And I like Australia. Okay, just a quick question, okay? Because I was thinking about my students as well. But in your case, I'm not really sure whether students, like the nature of students, are they from like different backgrounds, or are they normally active by themselves, or you know? So I'm thinking about how can like we try to engage our students in our teaching. Mm-hmm.
Kim, so
in what engage in what way?
For example, some students may feel shy. Some students may, you know, be outspoken or extrovert students, something like that. Or, you know. Mm.
Yes, I think that speaks to the point that I made earlier, just around the importance of having a whole range of teaching and learning activities that can happen in different kinds of online spaces. Because as I found in the research project, there are some students who did feel more comfortable writing a comment in the chat function, and that's great. But there also needs to be spaces where students, I guess, are given the opportunity to relate and respond to, you know, perhaps a small group of other students, or to relate and respond just to the teacher. So I think just providing a whole range of different activities that are configured in different ways, using different online spaces is a way really to give students an opportunity to participate in a teaching and learning activity that does lend to their preferred communication style, but also gives them the opportunity to be challenged and to communicate and be part of teaching and learning in new ways.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your questions, and Kim for your insightful answers. Any more questions, everyone? We still have plenty of time. It's time to interact with the speaker and which of us. You can type the question in the chat box, and I will invite you to read your question aloud, or you can turn on your video and unmute yourself to ask a question. Do you share the same challenges that Kim encountered and shared in her research? And do you have any thoughts about that? So Kim, my questions. What did you do and your teams do to encourage students to turn on their videos or to ask questions or to engage with the tutors directly rather than using the chat function?
They tried a range of things. So yeah, I mean that there were just a lot of factors that prevented students from turning on their cameras. So there was a practical issue of bandwidth. There was a practical issue of students not wanting to show their home environments. There was a practical matter of students having children at home and having people with them in their classroom at home. So there were a whole load of sort of practical factors that prevented students from being able to wanting or being willing to turn on their video. I mean, the tutors encouraged students to turn on their video. They invited particular questions. They reached out to specific students. But I guess there wasn't an overall sort of culture or feeling that it wasn't going to be a common practice in those particular online workshops.
Yeah. And I also feel that maybe they don't want to share their privacies and through Zoom. And privacy is taken seriously in some parts of Australia also.
Yes, that's correct. So there were a lot of barriers to that that being something that the students were very readily and easily took up in the online workshops. And also I would say that Blackboard Collaborate doesn't have the capacity to let the whole class be present on the screen as we have here in Zoom. So the students, and I do feel that the students would like that. It does, being able to see your classmates and see your teacher on the screen, like it's been shown to give a feeling of connection. And I mean, obviously, I'm sure we're experiencing that right now. So just the limitations of Blackboard Collaborate don't enable that whole classroom feel, or they don't allow more than 5 people on the screen at any one time. So it didn't really let students and teachers have a chance to experience, well, it's worth it, if everyone turns their video on, because we are going to get a chance to kind of be here as a group together, participating in this workshop together. So I think that didn't get a chance to get started, and students didn't get a feel for that. Just makes everything a lot more productive in the classroom. So that also sort of prevented that students taking up actually turning on their videos.
Yes. Thank you very much. And I also think now UTAS is using Zoom also. So we are using two platforms at the moment. So collaborate Blackboard and Zoom at the same time. So hopefully this will help tackle the challenges also. Thank you very much for your answer, Kim. And Aris, you put your hand up. That's wonderful. Can I invite you to share your questions?
Thank you so much, Dr. Kim, for that very insightful discussion. Actually, I have a lot of things in my mind right now, especially considering the challenges that we have. I don't know if it's true. I mean, this experience is also mutually shared with the rest of my colleagues in the Philippines. But basically, one of the challenges that I see as teachers, even for college students, is that we are competing with other social media platforms, other distractions online. We have TikTok. I don't know. I have observed that a lot of students seem to be so interested in other stuff outside of the academic stuff. Like they tend to be more discursive. They tend to be more sort of aware and very participative when talking about stuff that's outside of the academe. But then if you tell them, okay, we'll be using Facebook since Facebook is very popular to you, so we'll use Facebook, but then apparently their participation dwindles once it's already part of the academe. But then when you try to look into how they engage with their colleagues or with their classmates outside of school, they're so participative, they're so noisy online. So basically, yeah, that's one of the challenges that I would wish really for some other participants here in the Zoom room to probably address, and probably from Dr. Kim herself. I don't know, how did you do that as a team? And basically, second to that is, now that we're competing with the rest of the distractions, you are already problematizing their engagement, their participation, and all that. How much more is the problem becomes even worse because you wanted as much as possible for them to assert their identities, for them to understand what cultural pedagogy is, etc., etc. So yeah, the second problem is, how are we going to really inculcate in them that basically this online classroom is intentionally, for them to understand the issues that's happening around them, for them to be more participative, for them to be more assertive, and all that. So I hope you got my question. Thank you, Dr. Kim.
Thank you so much, Irish. They're really excellent questions. So to your first question around your observations of how students are so active and so engaged and got it all going on in their personal online communication. Look, I just think, and I think it's really your observation of the gap between that and how it is that the same online platforms and modes of communication have been able to be taken up in teaching and learning in the tertiary sector is something that's just really worthy of a lot more investigation. And I guess, I feel that academic educators need to come to the party and really start to investigate and learn how it is that young people in particular are communicating and learning and thinking and speaking in their online spaces, and to really harness those and learn from those modes of engagement, and take those modes of engagement and use them in teaching and learning spaces. And to me, the only way of that happening is by co-designing teaching and learning with young people and with students, and just really banking on young students' generosity in teaching educators and academics about how to like I think it's such a it needs a lot more active engagement, because I think without it there is going to be an increasing gulf between how online education is delivered by educators and how it is that that particularly young people are just living, thinking, writing, connecting, communicating, making sense of the world, all those ways that they're currently using it in their social media. Yeah. And your second question was also really excellent, and I had it in my head. It was, That's right. Sorry, it was to it was how it is that the teaching team was able or tried to, correct me if I'm wrong, get across in the online space the importance of, I guess, all the things that we're wanting them to learn out of, you know, a culturally responsive pedagogy. Is that Irish? So
yes, that's right.
How do we get across the importance of active listening? How do we get across the importance of reflective thinking? How do we, yeah, and that's such a great question, because I think what really struck the teachers who participated in the reflective research project is that getting that stuff across is often what the teachers in this study do by how they model their comportment in the classroom. It's how they show themselves, how they model their own active listening in the classroom. It's how they embody relating to people in the physical classroom. So a lot of that was around modeling that the teachers just do, I guess, without really recognizing the skills that they're drawing on and what it is that they're doing when they're in the shared physical classroom. So it was really interesting to see, you know, the expertise that teachers have to do all of that modeling that they don't realize that they are doing. And I guess that the challenges of doing that in the online space just made me realize what it is, one of the points that I put in my discussion, which is that I just think shared physical space, but even more so in the online space, what it is that this has to be made more explicit to students. So whether that's through, you know, the intended learning outcomes need to be ones that directly speak to the capacities that you're wanting students to cultivate. So capacities in active listening, capacities in reflective practice, and for that to be clear to the students. And I guess also just naming that up and being explicit about that when it's happening in a teaching and learning activities, so that the teachers and the students and everyone really knows that the point of why it is that we're engaging in this way is to develop X, or to, you know, learn a new insight into Y. So yeah, I just think it's just so important to, yeah, and this is for myself too, just thinking about, well, how is that named up and conveyed to students as being important? And also it kind of gets to the guts of what the teaching is about, you know, so that they know that that's the key so what is actually in the doing of that activity, you know, wherever it happens, in shared physical spaces or online. Yeah, but I just think that it's such a great question, because it points to that work and research that needs to happen around, well, how does a teacher model active listening just working in online spaces in relation to cultural safety? You know, so what would actually configuring an activity and some modeling and some feedback to the students and some, you know, a form of assessment, you know, just working in the online space, using different platforms, using different ways of configuring people. Yeah. So I haven't completely answered that, but it's, yeah, such rich questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Kim. It boils down to us again doing a lot of things, especially now that we have turned online. Thank you.
Correct. And I think one of the things that strikes me around that is also learning about, as I said in my presentation, the affordances of what the different technologies available to us actually do. You know, the active players and shapers of what happens in the teaching and learning activities, active in how it is, you know, the sort of teaching and learning environments that we can create. So I just think there's also just such a lot of work to be done around investigating the specificity of the different technologies that are available to us in the online spaces, and what it is that they enable and what they limit.
Yeah, thank you very much, Iris, for interesting questions, and for Kim for sharing your answers and your experience about that. Thank you so much. And we have another questions from the chat box Ngang Thương from Vietnam. Can you ask the question directly?
Hello, Miss Vinh. Hello, Miss Kim. Yeah,
Hello.
That's okay. Everybody, can you hear me? That's okay.
Yep, very clear.
Yeah. Thank you for a very interesting topic this afternoon. With my position at the university, I have some difficulty in making the environment, especially for engaging the collaborations of my students. Could you please share some experiences in that case? Thank you, Ms. Kim.
Thank you very much for the question. So I think you're asking about how to enable collaboration between students. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So this is such a good question, and I guess just in an ongoing process of exploring how to do this myself. So I guess experimenting with different ways of seeing what works. So for example, like I clearly struck some real learning around how it is that students are willing to collaborate and engage with each other in the synchronous online web classroom. But for example, I just think it's really important, as I said before, to really mix up the kind of platforms and the kind of spaces and the kind of options that students have. So one collaborative activity that I've since added to the teaching program is to get students to do a peer sharing activity with each other, but in an asynchronous discussion board. So this clearly works for some students. Some students didn't engage with it very well, but other students, they went away and they reflected about part of their life and they took a photo and then they shared that. And then they responded to another student's post who did a similar thing. And for some students, that was a really great space for them to have a collaborative engagement with each other. And there's the other students that clearly didn't suit or interest. So I guess it's just, that just trying things in a range of different ways to see what works.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nang Thương and Kim, for the question and for the answers. It's a really interesting discussion, isn't it? And now we have a lineup of speakers questions. So next, I will invite Grace. Grace, she put her hand up, which is really great. Grace, I remember you from Hobart. Is that correct?
Yes. Good afternoon, Lesbian and Kim. Okay. My name is Grace Abad from the Philippines, one of the state universities in the Philippines.
Another Grace.
I have interest. I am interested with your output on the online environment, intensifying the teacher's emotional labor. Okay, so it is really true that sometimes teachers also had a hard time also conversing with students online because of, yes, we also share the same experience on bandwidth, and then we also have experiences on students having discomfort in talking. But one of the challenge that I would like to ask you is, how did you go about with your struggle to feel effective in your teaching?
Thank you, Grace. That's a really good question. So I guess, as I flagged in my presentation, just to speak on behalf of the teachers who participated in the study, working in that kind of online classroom in that way just presented some really fundamental challenges to how the teachers felt about their own teaching. So I guess what I get from that is that it's really great that we had a learning experience, and from that I guess the learnings from that are that it's really, I don't know, important to I guess, you know, as I mentioned, for teachers to really learn and understand what is limited and is impossible in online teaching spaces. So I guess to kind of, you know, go through a process of managing expectations. And I think just like as I pointed to when I was responding to Irish's question, that work of really, I guess, really linking what happens in the online learning spaces with the pedagogies that you're using, and really using, you know, developing teaching learning activities that are very well tailored to the different online technologies, and understanding what you're doing and just explaining and making that clear to the teachers, so that they really understand what it is that being a teacher in that space is going to entail for them. And, you know, providing some training and some resourcing so that they understand what is going to happen in the space, you know, how they might potentially respond effectively to the space. And I guess also, to me, I feel like I can't send my teachers out into this out into this world again until I can really communicate to them that there is a bigger picture of teaching, and there's a bigger picture of pedagogy, which is informing this big range of teaching and learning activities that happen in a range of ways using this range of technologies. And across all of that, the students will be getting a certain teaching and learning experience. And across all of that, the teacher is going to get a range of different teaching experiences. And I think your question is so great, because it really points to how it is that teachers' identities need to evolve and change around expectations, you know, who we are, what we rely on to give us a feeling that, oh, good teaching and learning interaction has happened. I mean, that was what was really striking to the teachers who participated in the research study, is that they just felt like all the means that they have to really get a sense that the students understand the content, you know, to read the room, to you know, to see that, oh, there's a student over there who's looking a bit distressed, or all the things that we do in that embodied way in the classroom. If that's not there, we still need to have ways of feeling like you can be an effective teacher. So I guess that's just real, you know, learning about what is possible and accepting the limitations and you know, and the possibilities. And I guess, you know, it's contributing to conversation with teachers around, yeah, that there's different modes of teaching for different spaces, and that, you know, overall there should be a package of teacher engagements that happen across the course of a program of teaching that allow the teacher to experience a whole load of different things, and to kind of accept that it's a bigger range now. Do you know what I mean? It's not just the shared physical classroom where you're relying on your kind of your tacit knowledge of, you know, I can feel this, the class has got it now, or I can moderate this student because I can tell they're getting a bit upset. Like there's just a whole new repertoire of engagement that I think teachers need to, and myself, need to understand. Moving through different spaces, different capacities are required at different times. Yeah, and that hopefully should let teachers feel and understand that they're being a good teacher, but just perhaps not in the one mode that they developed through being a teacher in shared physical space classrooms.
Thank you very much, Kim, for the enlightenment of such a very, very struggling truth about teaching now and our struggle as teachers. Thank you. Thank you, Vian.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you again for the great questions, and Kim for sharing. I really like the concept that you mentioned in your answer about various modes, and the teacher needs to engage in different ways in various modes regarding given the important roles of multimodality in our teaching now. So I really like that concept. So we had lots of questions now. James, can I invite you to ask questions? Thank you.
Yes. I'm kind of jumping ahead. There are one or two in the chat that are before me. Are you hearing me okay?
From Laos, okay.
Shall I go ahead?
I will invite you to speak later. Yeah,
Up to you. You're the chair. Do you want me to go ahead or not? I'll wait till later.
Say, where are you? Are you happy for James to ask first, or would you like to ask Kim now?
Yes, please. Mr. Nuse.
Say from Laos.
Yes. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I'm a teacher in Laos, and I teach English for reading subject. As my questions that how to encourage, how to engage students in teaching reading online. Yes.
Can I ask you to just repeat? I just didn't quite catch the last bit of your question.
Yeah. How to engage students for teaching reading subject.
Yeah.
That's my question.
Yep. So the question is how to engage students in a reading subject.
Yes.
Yeah. In the online space. Yeah.
Yes, in the last bit, because while I teaching, some students do not like to participate. Some students less of I mean that the joy for a few minutes and they leave the meeting. Like that, and how to engage them.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question, and it's just I wish I had some really good answers about the realities of students who are doing their learning at home. Like I think it presents really fundamental kind of challenges to students staying with their online learning, and I guess just to sort of to go back to one of the points that I made before, just around giving the students an opportunity to really engage in a range of different online spaces and online activities, so that there's not just the one form of engagement that perhaps is quite not workable for a lot of students. The students who I've been reflecting on in this presentation, like there was a very large proportion of students who were clearly in very busy, distracted, people heavy environments on their phone, listening on and off to their online learning classroom. So I just think there needs to be other options in addition to that.
Yes. Can I share something?
Yes.
That for this problem, I give some assignment for my students to do at their home in their free time.
Yeah.
And after that, they hand in me in after hours or after other weeks. That's possible.
Yeah, look, I think that sounds like a really great asynchronous strategy that is really great to have that in the mix. And I think that's this has come up a few times, just that being open to having a whole mix of ways of engaging, and that sort of looking at it as an overall package of teaching and learning activities and engagements that together work together to create the overall teaching and learning outcomes that you're aiming for.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Kim.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much to you both. And we had two more questions, one from James. James, it's now your turn.
Okay, think we're ready to go. Thank you very much for giving the time. Thank you, Dr. McLeod, for your presentation. I've actually got two questions, if that may be permitted. Firstly, what extent are your findings that you shared specific to your particular discipline of cultural safety and healthcare education, or do you think they're relatable to other disciplines? I'll go ahead and answer the second question, which is maybe more in line with the discussion so far. You talked at one point about returning to on-campus face-to-face teaching, which is something that we here in Brunei have had to do recently in the previous semester. I'd like to ask, how did your students react at that particular point? Did they really love to be back in the same room and they really wanted to carry on in blended mode, or did they were they neutral or even negative about it? Would you like to address that? Thank you.
Thanks, James. Thank you for your question. So I've got such a positive response to your second question. I'll attend to that one first. The students, I mean, the students that traditionally, like in this space, you know, they're health profession students, and they often have quite a focus on clinical learning, and it's not always entirely obvious to them the importance of why they're doing this teaching and learning. So in previous years, we just anticipate and expect and work productively with, you know, a degree of student resistance to the teaching program. But I would say the students return to campus and on-campus workshops. So we return to the delivery which we've been doing prior to COVID, which you know, I feel is pedagogically sound. So the students get online content and online learning and teaching activities, and then they come on campus and do peer-led learning activities facilitated by a tutor. And they have just been so open and responsive and attentive and contributing in class, and just really conveying with their bodies how grateful that they are to be learning in a group of people with a teacher. Yeah, it's been quite a stark change of demeanour and application by the students across the board. Yeah, so there you go. Like that's a really unexpected positive outcome, and I guess it's also the teachers were just so grateful to be in the shared physical space classroom again too, because, you know, just being able to draw on all those skills of teaching that you know, educators often just have without really even being aware of them, to be able to bring all that into play again was just a huge relief for the tutors in the teaching program. To go to your earlier question, it's a really good question, and I was thinking I should have something to say about that in my presentation, but I didn't quite get there. I kind of outlined the distinctive features of cultural safety education, which really do focus on learning in and through relationships. So, you know, I guess that any kind of teaching that has that as a bit of a focus, everything that I say should be applicable to that kind of teaching. Certainly, you know, my students are all allied health professionals, but I think any student who is going on to work with people or to have an applied dimension of their learning, I'm hoping that most things, most of the observations would be consistent for that student population as well. Yeah. It's interesting though. There's just not a great deal of research and engagement in the cultural safety space. There's a little bit more in the diversity and inclusion space. So yeah, it's these that they're perhaps not as separate as they need to be.
Thanks for those answers.
Thank you, James, and thank you, Kim. Can I ask, because I have one question related to your answer, can I ask a question related to that? Sorry, Martin, if you don't mind, can I ask a question, but because it's related to Kim's answer. So Kim, I know you are coordinating big units at UTAS, and as you shared previously with me, you have over 1,000 students in one unit, right? And or are they all in Tasmania, or are they from different parts of Australia and even from overseas? And if they are all keen to back to campus, so you said you won't do any online education for students outside Tasmania or outside Australia. Can you share a bit more about your teaching context?
Yeah, sure. So this is actually the way that I've always worked in my time at UTAS. So working across multiple campuses, and we have a campus in Sydney. We have 3 campuses on the island of Tasmania. And I guess I imaginatively see the student cohort as like they're all kind of the same. They're just physically based at different places, and all the students get the same teaching and learning experience. So they all engage with the same online content, and they all do the same teaching and learning activities online. And then they go to their respective campuses and participate in on-campus or shared physical space workshops. Now, as I said before, that I feel that works very well as a way of students exploring in an experiential, peer-led way the concepts and the ideas that they're being exposed to in the online content. Now, the way that I work is that I have a large team of casual academics who do the work of being the teacher facilitators of the online workshops at all the different campuses. So I have teaching staff in Sydney, I have teaching staff in Launceston, I have teaching staff in Hobart, and I have teaching staff in Burnie. And they go to those campuses and they're physically present as the teachers in the on-campus workshops at the 4 different campuses. And I think I've always emphasised the importance of team building, of reflective practice, of collaborative research, of the teaching team knowing each other and developing relationships with each other, and work really hard to mentor and support my casual academic teaching team. And I think the model works because the teachers are very well supported in terms of guidance as to how it is that they facilitate in the classroom. So I provide a really detailed teaching guide, which outlines each teaching and learning activity, explains what the intended learning outcome is for each of the teaching and learning activities, and I provide all the classroom teaching materials that teachers need to teach in their shared physical classrooms. Yep. So, and also the teachers debrief and talk with me and each other. So I guess there's a lot of resourcing and care that I put into working with my teaching team that makes it I feel sure that the students across all the campuses are getting a similar on-campus in-person experience when they're in the classroom, which is really important given I'm expected to deliver a pretty much standardised teaching and learning experience to all students in all places.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. And I have learned from your teaching contest and that the purpose of the webinar series not about engaging with Asian participants and academics, but also for UTAS academics to learn from each other. And we learn from different disciplines. So that's really interesting to know, because in my units and in my teaching, I'm also teaching. I had teaching staff at different campuses, and at the same time I had students out of Tasmania and overseas, so I'm still doing online teaching. I did before COVID-19, during COVID-19, and after COVID-19. So really interesting to learn more from your experience, your teaching content. Thank you very much. Martin, can you invite you to ask your question, please?
Yes, thank you. So I'm Martin, I'm in Vietnam. So I don't know if it's in the scope of your research, but I was wondering if you have tried using different types of teaching scripts to see which one was the one that gives you best engagement. And the other one is if you found different ways to understand or to measure engagement, because you see, it is quite different to teach offline and online. So the way to measure engagement should also be different, right? So the way we deliver lectures offline should be also different online. So I was wondering if you had your research cope with that.
Thank you for the question, Martin. Yeah, it's a good one. I I think the only way to really investigate student engagement is to invite students to give you that feedback. And I'm planning on moving into that space for the next iteration of my teaching, which happens mid-September through to Christmas. Yeah, I think it's, yeah, I'm just at the moment thinking about, I guess, creative and qualitative ways of engaging with students to really drill down into how it is that they are engaging with online teaching and learning, as well as in the shared physical spaces. So yeah, that's being planned. And on the matter of different teaching scripts, can you explain a little bit more what you mean by that?
So, yeah, normally we have a way to deliver lectures offline. And so normally we have to change it. Let's say make the lecture shorter, include more tasks, individual tasks, group tasks, and you know, teaching from larger groups into teaching in smaller groups. There's a number of changes that we have to make. So have you tried using different sort of scripts on the lectures, or have they all the same?
Yes, so I have transitioned into ditching the online lecture altogether. So, and this is, that changes the shape and design and look of my online content. So effectively, the students are led through a series of teaching and learning activities online. So they don't have that passive learning experience of just watching an online lecture. They are actively engaged in their learning all the time. And I guess, you know, pedagogically, you would think that's great, you know, we should have more of that. But I do feel that there is a space for short online lectures to still be part of the mix. I think there is, for some students, just receiving and learning through engaging with information that's been distilled for them and is being explained by an expert is still good to have as part of the mix of what they do online. So in terms of experimenting with what students respond well to, you know, I'm just noting at the moment the feedback that the last lot of students gave to that mode of delivery. Yeah, and they, you know, it's more challenging for them. It asks more of them. So it's, you know, it's that interesting thing of balancing. I know it's stronger pedagogically, but also just also wanting, you know, students overall to have teaching learning experience that they can move through, you know, and enjoy.
Thank you very much, everyone. We had such a productive discussion today, and perfect timing, 5:30 now. So it's maybe if you don't have any further questions, perhaps we can stop now. And once again, let us spread out thanks to Dr. Kim McLeod for sharing your fascinating research to us, and to all wonderful participants for your active engagement. Thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow at Professor James Wickers, Director of the Dimension Center at the University of Tasmania, to talk more about online education in his discipline. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a great afternoon, have a great evening, and I'll look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Thanks very much. Bye.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you a lot, Miss Bing, Miss Kim.
Thank you. Bye-bye.